to talk us through a short story that she's been working on and give us, I guess, a couple of pointers or different perspectives on how that works. Is that true enough for
Yeah.
me? Yeah, great. And then we're going to have a bit of a question and answer. But yeah, it's still strange that this is only the second time that we've met in a digital way. So I don't know how you're all feeling about that, but I still get quite nervous. Yeah, so if this is just, think of it as more of a chat, if we can, in our own rooms and heads and spaces. And yeah, and also there's space today as well if you want to talk about any of the content or any of the videos that have been up or any of the writing tasks or anything that's been posted, because I realize it's only once a week that we're kind of getting this face-to-face time. And I'm happy to stretch it out a wee bit if anyone has any questions. But yeah, other than that, for now, I'm going to pass you on to Jan Carson, who's on my right on my screen, but this might not make any sense to anybody else.
It's a
There.
little bit like Celebrity Squares or something.
Yeah.
Hi guys, it's really lovely to see you all. I hope, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, if at any point you hear mad barking, that's my neighbour's dogs. I called them the Hounds of the Baskervilles. They do tend to go off sometimes, so we'll just ignore that. What I thought I would do is I would work through a wee short story that I have been working on over the last few weeks, and it's a reworking of a kind of folktale myth similar to what you guys are working on, and I'm going to read the first half of it, and then I'll stop and I'll talk you through kind of my thinking of what I was doing and how I prepared for it and the research, and then I'll read you the second half because it's such a cliffhanger. You'll want to know what happens in the second half. Before I start, I wanted to I hope you've all had a chance to watch the wee videos that I made. I'm becoming a real dab hand at the old filmmaking. I've used a roll of masking tape to sellotape my iPhone to a chair to do those, so no expense spared at all. And it talks you through some of the things. And I wanted to say just from the start that I've been at this for a very, very long time. I've been writing seriously for probably about 20 years, 2 to 4 hours a day for 20 years. And at the start, I wrote a lot of rubbish. I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And to be honest, one of the things I like to kind of get across to people when they're coming to writing for the first time is you're not going to be perfect on the first attempt. I am far from perfect now, and that's after 20 years at it. A lot of it is just keeping going. And some of us have a wee inner perfectionist thing that switches on. And as soon as you look at the blank page, you think, gosh, if this isn't going to win the Booker Prize on my first go, then there's no point in putting it down. The thing about story is it's about having fun. It's about the meaning of it and getting something across, and a bit of your personality as well. So I always say, if you can tell a good story, you can write a good story. So get rid of whatever that thing is in your head that a lot of English teachers taught you in high school about having fancy language and loads of similes and metaphors and sophisticated things. This is about telling a story on page, and it's about captivating the person that reads or listens to it. So bring yourself to that and have fun, and there's absolutely no wrong answers to this. It's what I love about sitting in writing workshops. I've one way of writing, and I always encounter people who are coming at it from a completely different angle, and it's so refreshing. It's so refreshing. So what I'm going to read you, I'm going to start and read 3 pages, so settle down. I've got my cup of tea with me. If you've got tea or coffee, or let's see, it's 2:45. If you're on the hard stuff at this stage, that's absolutely okay as well. Nearly the weekend. This is a commission that I got for an arts organisation called the Freelance Foundation, which is based over in London, and they wanted us to respond to a piece of visual art by an artist who is Vietnamese filmmaker, and the title of it was Old Land, New Waters. And when I heard that, Old Land, New Waters, there was a whole thing just kicked off in my head around myth and folk and all of those great stuff, and what that could mean in a contemporary setting. Like, how could I bring it from old to the new part of the story? And I began to work on this. I'm not going to tell you too much about it, except most of my work is set here in East Belfast, which is where I live. I like to write about what's right outside my front door. And I also am terribly, terribly nosy. So a lot of this story is from me wandering around East Belfast, staring at people and listening into their conversations. And it features a place called the Templemore Baths. Does anybody know the Templemore Baths? Tonight, when you get off this, have a wee Google, because they're the most gorgeous old-fashioned Victorian bathhouse. And if you can picture it in your head, it's got a big pool in the middle, and then you know those wee changing rooms around the side. So you can come straight out of a cubicle into the water. And I just think it's a fantastic space. So that's where I set my story. I'm going to read you 3 pages. So this will probably take about 12 minutes. I will not be offended if you close your eyes, because I like to close my eyes when I'm being read to as well. Troubling the water. The rumour about the Templemore Baths was essentially circular in shape, which is to say, this one told that one passed it on to the next, and within a few days it had made a complete circuit of the knit and natter. Nobody could have said who started it, though Agnes was the likeliest candidate. Agnes had a source in the council, a great niece in cleansing services. She was the group's go-to for complaints about missing wheelie bins or the dog dirt which appeared in the bus shelter, each deposit individually bagged like a portion of butcher-bought mince. Kathleen suspected Agnes was the instigator, although it had been Mary who'd called to ask the length of her magic loop. She'd seen a thing on Facebook looking hats knitted for preemie babies and wanted to give it a whirl. And to let Kathleen know, the paramedics were in with Marty round the corner. Not Marty Barr, the other Marty, the one with the leg. And to tell her the forecast was bad for the weekend, and chocolate digestives were on 2 for 1 in super value. Oh, and on the off chance, had she heard anything funny about the Templemore Baths? Kathleen knew from the slight change in pitch that this was the real reason for Mary's call. It's not the first time Kathleen had encountered a rumour like this. People assumed it was only country folks who went in for the weird stuff, that if you lived in a city with modern conveniences such as satellite television and all-night Tesco, you'd be too sophisticated to go in for such nonsense. Not a bit of it. The East was full of old ladies who spun tall tales, Margarets, Maureen's and Marys, pronounced Mary to rhyme with cheery, thus differentiating them from the other sort of Mary, the ones named after the Mother of God. Mother of God, these women loved to gossip. The more unlikely the story, the quicker they took to it, spreading word of strange happenings by phone, by text, by street corner chat, by carrier pigeon if such a vehicle came to hand. There was no keeping a good rumour down, and Kathleen had heard a fair few good ones in her time. There was the one about the young fella in Ballybean who'd been knocked down dead by joyriders, only to wake up on the undertaker's slab, bruised and confused, but ultimately grand. They claimed a miracle for that one. Apparently the granny was a champion wee prayer, a tight wee Baptist woman with a beret permanently clamped to her crown. They said her earnest petitions had brought the wee lad back. In certain circles you could still say that sort of thing and be believed. Then there was the lady who walked among the headstones in Dundonald Cemetery, and the equally dead RUC officer, half his face missing from a car bomb, who frequented the back corner of the Park Avenue's lounge. There was the woman with the cure for asthma in Ballyhack, and the old lad who sat on the bench next to McDonald's drive-through. He'd do your future for the price of a Smarties McFlurry. He was accurate, they said, but wouldn't give racing tips no matter how much she offered. Officially, the Protestants didn't go in for all that supernatural shite. It was the other sort who done the weeping statues and miracles. Pragmatism might well have been preached from the pulpit, but in the streets and fussy wee living rooms of East Belfast, folks still believed in things unseen. There wasn't much else to hold on to round here. The Templemore Baths had been clinging to the end of Templemore Avenue since 1893. Red-bricked, chimneyed and blessed with a somewhat incongruous spire, the structure didn't immediately scream swimming pool. The passing stranger, and there were very few strangers passing through this part of the city, might well have taken the building for a Victorian cloth mill or a place of worship. Inside, the facilities remained reassuringly old-fashioned. The stench of bleach and chlorine sat crisply on every tiled surface. Drafts swept uninterrupted from one end of the building to the other, and all the heating pipes were crusty. A deep rectangular pool dominated the inner sanctum. The ceiling above was high, windowed, and impractically arched, so the air above water remained permanently icy. In winter, the swimmers could see their breath fogging in front of them as they crawled and butterflied up and down the lanes. Individual changing cubicles lined the pool's edge, so it was only a short swimsuit-clad shuffle from the door to the water. The old ladies appreciated this. They didn't like to be observed, varicosed, veined and bulging in their saggy one-pieces and clipped beneath your chin caps. The old boys didn't give a rat's ass how they looked in their trunks, yet still swam in the baths because they were cheap and handier than bussing across town to the big municipal complex on the Boucher Road. Through the day, when the Waynes were in school, it was really only old ones who swam there. Yes, you might stumble across the odd pregnant lady, or a young mum dragging a toddler across the shallows, clumsy and howling in orange armbands. And there was, of course, the rougher element. Young fellas on sticks like bandy-legged lambs hobbling to the pool's edge, lowering themselves painfully in. The physios said swimming was good for them, low impact and all that. There was very little else you could do exercise-wise with the kneecaps taken off you. It was a pity of these young fellas. Or was it? Sure, they only had themselves to blame. The old women gave them the side eye as they swam past and knew not to bring anything valuable down to the pool. You couldn't really trust a logger, could you? Those kind of lads would be in and out and away with your purse before you'd even got your key out. The knit and natter ladies were Templemore regulars. They came for aqua aerobics on Tuesday morning and afterwards retired to a coffee shop round the corner. The place was staffed by ones with special needs, though the coffee wasn't as good as Costa, and sometimes you had to go up and repeat your order to the supervisor. The ladies liked to be seen to be doing their bit. Tuesdays weren't an official knit and natter session. These took place on Thursday afternoons and Monday mornings. They were held in the community centre and presided over by Julie, who was employed to run projects for older people. The ladies could count on Julie to keep them well supplied with tepid mugs of Nescafe, jammy Dodgers, and the inevitable evaluation forms which appeared after every session. Nobody ever joined the Knit and Natter, though to its credit, they'd only ever lost 2 members. Marlene, who died, and Susan, who was doting now and moved in with her son in Bangor. This bothered Julie. It didn't bother the Knit and Natter ladies one wee bit. All 8 of them had known each other since girlhood. They'd no desire to recruit outsiders. They met twice a week to knit and gossip, taking advantage of the community centre's central heating. All but Linda, who was constrained by her oxygen tank, reconvened on Tuesdays for their subsidised swim. It was Wednesday when Mary phoned Kathleen. They wouldn't be back in the baths for almost another week. Mary wasn't saying Kathleen should make a point of going down there unscheduled or anything. Mary wasn't even claiming there was any truth in the rumour. She was simply letting Kathleen know what people were saying. She was just being a good friend, for she knew Kathleen was crippled with the arthritis, not to mention poor Bill. To be honest, it was Bill she was really thinking of. She didn't like to put it so bluntly, but Bill didn't have long left. And daft as the whole thing sounded, sure there was no harm in trying. You'd try anything when it came close to the end, wouldn't you? Hadn't she put her own dying mother in the car and driven her all the way up to Ballymena to see that faith healer? Hadn't made the blindest bit of difference, but at least Mary could content herself knowing she'd tried. There was a comfort in knowing you'd done everything you could. The conversation went on like this for several minutes. The telephone receiver began to sweat uncomfortably against Kathleen's ear. Mary's calls were always delivered in a similar roundabout style. There was a nugget of news in there somewhere. You just had to wait patiently until it emerged. Kathleen caught Bill's eyes across the room. He was a good sort. He'd muted the TV as soon as the phone went and rolled his wheelchair up close to the screen so he could read the subtitles. She mouthed the words, Mary, to him and pointed at the phone. He rolled his eyes ceilingwards before returning to the news. The light from the screen drew the colour out of his face. He was particularly pallid today. The last round of treatment had left him wild papery looking. Kathleen needed to get Mary off the phone so she could get him up to bed before he was too exhausted to help her. "What are you going on about, Mary?" she asked, interrupting the other woman mid-flow. "There's a girl swimming at the baths on Friday mornings," said Mary. "A foreign girl." "What sort of foreign?" "I'm not sure. Eastern European, I think. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, they say this girl's got some kind of cure. If you're in the water when she's swimming, it comes off on you." "Bollocks," said Kathleen. Bill was starting to fall asleep and she was running out of patience. "Honest to God, Kathleen, our Liz was down there last Friday when the girl went in, and afterwards there wasn't a speck of psoriasis on her. You know yourself she's been plagued for years. And the young one in the butcher's counter at Spar said his wife took their baby in when that girl was in and it fixed her squinty eye. I've even heard somebody over on the Beersbridge Road got rid of their cancer." She dropped her voice to a whisper as she spoke. This was clearly for Bill's benefit. The Bill was flat out by this stage and snoring. "I'm just saying," she continued. "Don't rule it out, Kathleen. If I was in your position, I'd try anything." "It's not true," said Kathleen. "The thing about the pill and getting healed is in the Bible. It's one of Jesus' miracles." "Is it? I don't know that one." "Well, if it's in the Bible, then it must be true." "Aye, for Bible times maybe, not from now in East Belfast." "Ah, you're probably right there, Kathleen. If Jesus was going to do a miracle nowadays, he'd probably go somewhere a bit classier than the Templemore Baths. There's that waterslide park over in Lisburn. Grandbairns love it. He'd probably go somewhere like that." "He would indeed," said Kathleen, and shortly after hung up. So I shall leave it there for that's about 2/3 of the way through actually. So what I wanted to do was talk you through that because you can see it's not like a traditional kind of folk tale, but there are mythic kind of otherworldly folk elements coming out of it. So I'll bring my wee notes up here so I can see. So yeah, when I got the commission through and I saw this idea, old land, new water, it really fed into a lot of what I've been doing in my work recently, which has been looking at 3 different things. I'd explained, I think, in the wee videos that I'm a magic realist, and that magic realists, it's kind of otherworldly things happen, but they're grounded in real life. So all of my work, I tend to set it in realistic places. So it's not Narnia or worlds that I'm creating. It's, you know, what I can see when I go out to the shops or I go for a swim at the Templemore Baths. The 3 things that I have kind of become really interested in are where the magical, the mythical, and the miraculous fuses over. You can tell I'm from a Presbyterian background because you're getting a 3M sermon, 3 different points in it. I got really interested in those 3 things. Primarily the magic is, it's why I'm a magic realist. I've got an overleaping imagination and I get bored when things are a bit too realistic. I like there to be some weird shit, some otherworldly thing going on. So I'm always throwing in a dinosaur or a talking cat or a flying child or something. The magic really, really appeals to me. The mythical has come a wee bit more difficult to me. I did, as I mentioned, I grew up in a very tight Protestant Presbyterian background. And to be really honest, we didn't have a huge grounding in things like even Irish mythology. I didn't know all of the wonderful Greek myths and legends. And so these last few years, I have really, really enjoyed finding out a bit more of those. And I shared with you, I think, in this session, Borges' book of imaginary beings. And it is a wonderful, wonderful tool. It's got lists of all of the weird creatures. And they form a kind of backdrop for me. So when I'm stuck for ideas, I can just go through there and think, oh, the Leviathan or the Kraken, who's he? I'm going to do a bit of research. And then how could I bring that into the real world right now? So that, I think, really interests me too, the mythical, and particularly for me, it's felt really freeing to delve into Irish mythology and to know the legends that are associated with this place where I live. So the mythical really interests me as well. And then I'm also really intrigued by the miraculous. So when you come from a religious background, like I grew up with the Bible probably as my first text. I always talk about everybody has a primary storytelling language. So you have a first language that you speak, and for most of you it's probably English. Some of you it might be Irish, or if you've come from somewhere else it might be a different language. And I hear from friends who have a different language from me that that's the language that you think in. It's the language probably that you dream in, that your best ideas come in. And so that's when you tell a story, it comes easiest in your first language. It's the same with your story language. So if you've grown up with a background in Greek mythology, you'll quite often find that people use those stories as the structure for how they tell a story. If you've grown up with beautiful Irish myths, that can form your backdrop. If you've grown up with a drunk uncle who likes to tell big tall tales at weddings, that might be your story language. So you might have a rambling, slightly humorous comic language. For me, I grew up with the Bible as my primary storytelling language, particularly the Old Testament. So a lot of my stories have these cycles of legacy, what we inherit from one generation to the next, and evil and wrongdoing and repentance and things like that. I can't seem to get rid of it. It's the language that I learned to tell stories in, and it just keeps coming back. And it's a very rich language to play with as well. So I've become increasingly interested in where those three things come together, because you find in a lot of places where there is a kind of huge religious input, an emphasis on the family, so tight family units, and also this background of oral storytelling. You quite often find those three things playing together. So I'm talking about communities like the Deep South in America, where we have wonderful Southern Gothic writers come out of there. And also there you have got oral storytelling, tight family units, and extreme religion. Same in South America and Latin America. That's where a lot of the magic realists came from, and you get those, and Russia as well is another place. I think Northern Ireland's like that. I think Northern Ireland has a huge culture of religion. It has a storytelling culture, and it also has this culture of tight, close family units. So it surprises me that there's not more of this kind of writing that explores the relationship between those three. So that's where the background and the thinking came from that. And that's actually a wee bit of kind of academic theory there. So you can take that off and say you've had a background in magic realism this morning. And all those things were going on in my head when I sat down to write this story. The water thing really, really appealed to me. I think water is hugely, hugely symbolic and appears in lots of stories that I've written, possibly because it rains so much in Northern Ireland. It's very, very hard to get away from the water here. And when I started to think about water in the context of East Belfast, Templemore came to me like that. It's a building that I walk past very often. It's a building that I think is a really interesting, unique space, and it's a watery building. The water's literally running down the walls in places. And I thought this would make a great backdrop for a story. And then I began to think about where else does water appear in myth and legends and stories. And there are lots and lots of things I could have played with, like that we mentioned the Leviathan or the Kraken or the sirens in Greek mythology, or the Kelpies and the Selkies that we have in Irish mythology. But I went back to my primary storytelling language, which is the Bible. And there's a story in the New Testament about the pool of Bethesda. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which was a pool where anybody who had a disability would sit around the edge. And once a day, an angel would come down, and the King James Version says, trouble the water, which I thought that's a gorgeous phrase, trouble the water. So upset the water. And the first person who was able to get in after the angel had touched the water would be healed. And I thought, that's a gorgeous story. I know it from the miracle in the Bible, but it's also a really gorgeous, strong image. And I literally just took that image and I put it into the Templemore Baths. You can see that quite clearly. It's just a transplanting of one story into a different context. Now, the hard work is what you do with that. Anybody can transplant a story and set it in Tesco's or set it in your living room or an environment that you know. You have to do the kind of joining up bit. If anybody's an interior decorator, or even if you decorate cakes, when you plunk something down, you have to start smoothing the edges so you can't see the joins. And that's the hard work of being a magic realist. That's where the realism bit comes down. And you can see it in this story in a couple of things. First of all, it was finding a narrative voice. Who was going to tell the story? Because it had to be somebody believable. And I've gone from telling it from Kathleen's perspective. I thought this could be a story, you know, that would be about older people, because who might be ill? Where would you get a large group of people who all want it to be healed of something at the same time? And I work with older people a lot, and one of the groups that I work with are knit and natter groups, where older ladies get together to knit and have a gossip. And I thought, yeah, that would fit really well with this story, a knit and natter group. So I began to do that. I began to build up the layers of spending some time getting to know Kathleen. And I said in one of our earlier videos, when you decide who's going to tell your story, you need to spend time with that person until they start to feel real and believable. When I'm writing about East Belfast, I usually put on my parka and I pound the streets furiously with my characters, which probably looks a bit mad to lots of people, but it's how I get under their skin and start to feel like they're real to me. For you, it might just be sitting thinking about your character, jotting some ideas down in your notebook, or even, and this is a sneaky kind of trick I use, I quite often fall asleep at night thinking about the character that I'm working on in my stories. There's something weird happens in your brain as you drift off to sleep, where it merges, and I quite often wake up with new ideas and new perspectives on characters. So using that really fruitful space as you tip into sleep. Somebody's yawning there because I'm talking about sleep. We'll all start yawning now. This can be an experiment on whether yawns catch on online. So we did that, and then the final thing that I did there, and I think it's really important, is the detail. So you'll notice that there's lots of specific detail in this story. It doesn't just say he had a biscuit. It says he has, the women have jammy dodgers. They don't just go to another leisure centre. They go to Lisburn water slide park, or they go to the leisure centre on the Boucher Road. There's a bit in a minute where B&M Bargains comes in. Use specific kind of details to ground your story. The example I always use for this is, how many stories have you read where a man goes into a pub and says to the barman, "I'll have a beer, please"? Have you ever gone into a pub and said, "I'll have a beer"? You say, I'll have a Harp, or I'll have a Heineken, or I'll have a whatever it is you like to drink. And that makes it feel real, the details. It's very, very rare that we talk in these generic kind of words. The more detail that you can put in, the more it's going to feel like it's a real thing. It's a strange thing, because sometimes people think the detail actually rules people out. So if you're not from that specific bit of the world, anybody here from East Belfast? No. Did you guys mostly get what was going on in the story? So like the references don't put you off, even though you maybe don't know where those places are. They actually help you to imagine what it's like in your head. So the more specific detail that you can put into your stories, the more it's going to ping and actually feel like this is something that I can believe in. And the final thing I want to say, and I'll read the second half of it to you now, is what quite often happens when you're a beginner writer is you get overwhelmed by getting all of the detail in and all of the plot. And I'm going to give you a wee sneaky tip for this, and I continue to write like this even 20 years later. I write in layers. So every day I usually write about 1,000 words. Get the 1,000 words down, and the next day I come back and I will start at the beginning again and read through the 1,000 words, and then maybe add another 1,000 words on to that. And I do that if I'm writing a novel. I'll start at the beginning of each chapter and do that. If I'm writing a short story, I'll begin at the beginning of the short story. What that does is it helps you weave things through. So you've got in your head, I need to get all of these 20 facts about what happens in this story. This happens, then this, then this, then this. As you read it through like that, you'll see these wee natural opportunities to slide in a fact. So, in this story here, Kathleen's husband Bill is dying. Now, if I started with that off the top, hello, this is Kathleen, her husband is dying of cancer. It just feels like you're being sucker punched with too much information. You have to slot it in. Like it starts with Mary saying, Bill's not great, is he, kind of thing. And then later on we see Bill wheeling his wheelchair up to the screen to see the TV, and you get more and more and more perspective. And she says he's wild papery looking after his last treatment. So it's dropping those wee clues. And if you write like that, coming back and editing and weaving things in, it actually makes it a lot easier for you to slip them in a natural way, rather than trying to shove them into places and make sure we've got all the facts across. A good way to do this as well, it really helps, is just taking another sheet of paper or a page on your computer and plotting out what it is you want to get in. So you've got your story. These are all the things that I want to reveal about my character, and these are all the things that happen in the story. And you know you need to get them in somewhere, but you don't want to disrupt the flow of the story so it feels too top heavy. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I actually just found out that Zadie Smith writes the same way, so I feel like she probably learned that off me. But it also kind of gave me a nod that I was in the right direction if I do that. I thought I was doing something mad writing like that, but that's what I do. The great thing is as well, editors love it, because by the time you hand in a manuscript, you've already edited it about a dozen times. So it takes away all of the mad editing. I am going to read you the last 2 pages, if that's okay. Does that sound okay? And then we'll have questions. And then if no one asks questions, I'll get really cross, first of all. And also I will just start blithering on about anything for the next 15 minutes. So can you all be thinking of really difficult questions? I'll answer anything, like literally anything, because I have had to answer anything in the last 3 months. Let's see, where are we? Aha. So we had left Kathleen hanging up on Mary. She tried to put the Templemore baths to the back of her mind. She knew it was nonsense, or pure coincidence. Swimming was good for sick people. Doctors were always banging on about gentle exercise. Everybody felt better for having been to the baths. It was nothing to do with the foreign girl appearing. Nothing at all. But then again, what if the rumours were true? They were living in strange times. Bill was only after telling her a fella in England had given birth to a baby, and in the States there were holy rollers claiming they could raise the dead. She didn't know what to believe anymore. At the end of the day, thought Kathleen, was there any real harm in taking Bill to the baths? Better to chance your arm and be disappointed than miss out for fear of looking daft. She didn't sleep a wink all night for considering it, and by breakfast time had decided, yes, they would go down there on Friday morning, though she would have to make it look coincidental, like it was nothing to do with the girl being there. Half the knit and natter had had the same idea. By the time Kathleen got Bill out of his chair, into his trunks, and transferred into the special hoist, the other ladies were emerging from their own cubicles. Agnes, with her blood pressure, Mary, who suffered from lumbago, Deirdre and Evelyn, who had so many complaints between them, Kathleen could never keep track of who was crippled with what from one week to the next. They lingered round the pool like elephants toeing the edge of a watering hole. Nobody wanted to be the first one in. It was important to maintain an air of nonchalance. You couldn't let the others see you'd come here looking to get healed, for you'd only feel a right idiot when it didn't happen. There'd been a similar standoff last November when Poundland ran a Black Friday special on selection boxes. They'd all turned up at 10 to 9, ready to grab enough for every one of their grandbabies, and, confronted by the others, felt the need to mask their desperation. They'd made a sterling attempt at pretending to be there for toothpaste or toilet cleaner, and only stumbling upon the selection box offer by chance. This morning, they eyed each other suspiciously across the water and mumbled their excuses. Agnes was trying to lose a bit of weight. Mary had mixed her days up and came down to the bath thinking it was an aqua aerobics day. Evelyn and Deirdre claimed the doctor had prescribed swimming to ease their various complaints, and spotting a perfect opportunity, Kathleen jumped on the back of their excuse. She said the specialist had told Bill the very same thing. She looked for her husband, hoping for an alibi, and when he didn't offer one, stood lightly on his naked foot, so he got the message. Yes, he said, nodding. The specialist thought the water might help with his pain. The specialist had said no such thing, but the two of them had been together long enough to understand when backup was required. Kathleen hadn't told Bill that she hoped a dip in the Templemore baths might cure his terminal cancer. She'd found herself incapable of voicing the words, though they seemed almost plausible in her head. Out loud, she knew they'd sound limp and ludicrous, like the punchline to a bad cracker joke. Instead, she'd appealed to her husband's romantic side. As teenagers, they'd spent many hours down the deep ends of the baths. The east, with its tiny houses stacked one on top of the other, offered very little privacy for courting couples, and they'd soon learned how to keep their faces casual and impassive, whilst beneath the waterline they touched each other through their swimsuits in blatant disregard of the sign forbidding heavy petting. Kathleen and Bill had fond memories of the baths. She'd asked him for one last dip for old time's sake. Afterwards, she'd taken to SD Bell's for a fancy cup of coffee and a bun. It was not like Kathleen to ask for anything, so Bill conceded immediately, and had been somewhat baffled to find the other knit and natter ladies intruding upon their wee moment together. It was obvious that all 5 women were waiting for the foreign girl to appear. Kathleen understood their logic. She'd done her homework, fished the old King James version out of the bookcase, and read the story before leaving the house. If this girl was anything like Jesus, and that was the assumption to end all assumptions, they'd have to wait for the spirit to trouble the water. Or, in local parlance, the cure wouldn't take if they were in the pool before her. If Agnes's furtive glancing was anything to go by, the girl was already here and changing in the cubicle furthest from the entrance. Kathleen could picture her in there, dragging her hair up into a high ponytail, contemplating a wee cappuccino after her swim, not for a minute anticipating 6 senior citizens waiting to suck the power out of her the instant she hit the water. Poor wee lassie, thought Kathleen. The young were never fully aware of their own capabilities. When she emerged, the girl was plainer than she'd imagined, a bit hefty round the thighs and just as pale as a local. She didn't look like a miracle. She looked like the kind of girl who cleaned toilets for a living. Still, you couldn't judge people on looks alone. Kathleen herself had been at school with a girl who ended up a novelist and a more homely-looking girl she'd never seen. She glanced across the room. Agnes was already inclined towards the pool's edge, her weight resting on her front leg like a runner poised in the starting blocks. Mary was all business too, her face folded in grim concentration. So it has come to this, thought Kathleen. They were pitching themselves against each other, for it was only the first to hit the water who'd get the good of the miracle. Everybody else was just going to get wet. Kathleen's dying husband didn't seem to give her any natural advantage. It was every knit and natter lady for herself this morning. Damn them all, she thought. I deserve this. As the girl curled her toes around the pool's lip and prepared to dive, Kathleen wrapped her arms around her husband's flabby belly and with all the strength she could muster, jumped. They hit the water a split second after the girl. The other 4 followed immediately, plopping dully into the pool like dropped stones. For a second the water was white with froth. It puckered, then settled slowly as the 5 grey heads bobbed back to the surface, spluttering wildly. Agnes, Mary, Deirdre, Evelyn, and Kathleen. They blinked the chlorine out of their eyes. They looked like they wanted to stab each other, though their lips were smiling and their mouths were saying, "That was some splash, wasn't it? It's a wonder there's any water left in the pool." Bill was not so buoyant. Bill would require some assistance from the lifeguard and oxygen and a long weekend in ICU. Bill would not see the end of the month. Poor Bill. The knit and natter ladies noted his declining condition and did not ask Kathleen if the baths had helped at all, if there was any truth in the rumour. They felt bad for having given the poor women hope. They'd be more careful in future about what they passed on. Kathleen felt bad too, but her guilt was different, was not so easy to dismiss. She'd done her best to help Bill. Or had she? Perhaps some selfish part of her had wanted the miracle for herself. Her body had rushed ahead of her good intentions, and it had been her heels which pierced the water first, her legs, arms, and aching arthritic limbs which soaked up the cure. Kathleen had been healed. Bill hadn't. She couldn't even bear witness to the miracle, for the awful shame of it. The end.
Oh, I love that. Start.
Thank you. I don't even know who said that. You're all disembodied voices at this point.
Yeah. Can you unmute everyone, Jude? Sorry. Just, I can't unmute, but I think Jude has the power.
Jude, have you got the power?
I can do it too.
Okay, great.
This is a modern day miracle. Jude has got the power.
Jude's
So-
muted as well.
I hope that that was helpful and gave you a bit of a laugh and cheered you up this afternoon. It's probably deeply disrespectful as well, so I hope it didn't offend anybody at all. But you can see there are themes of both the miraculous, the magical, and the kind of mythical elements all woven through that story. But it also reads like a story that's very much about here and now, and the community that I work in and the place outside my door. And I think please feel free to be playful when you come to these projects. Sometimes when we hear folk and myth as themes, we think things have to be desperately serious and very heavy. They can be really fun as well. They can be full of humor and full of your own personality too. So I think, Danny, are we good to go to questions? Is that okay?
Yeah, 100%. It's just there's also a couple of people have messaged in the chat.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, before we start on to questions, thank you so much. That's completely lifted me. I was chuckling away there. But because there's so few of us today as well, it's very much an open floor. So no pressure on all of you, but it's your time to shine.
I guess if you want to
Yeah, can I say it's more a response as well as a question? First of all, it was Becky said I absolutely loved it. And what I loved about it was the humour.
Yeah.
And the detail. I mean, the detail thing I've noticed with other writers too. By the way, I should just say I think you're a brilliant writing teacher.
Oh,
and I'd love to see more of you do this. So that was just some feedback. I presume you know that Templemore means the big church?
I did not know that. So I clearly didn't do very much research, Angela.
No, well, I just assumed that Templemore is in Irish the big church. And I just thought, I think that's almost like the fact that you didn't know that then makes it even more magical, mythical and miraculous.
I'm going to tell you something, Angela. See, when you write stuff, quite often, like academics and people come behind and they say, oh, it's very clever. This means this, and there's layers in this. And you always say, oh, thank you very much. I thought of that. That was totally intentional when I wrote that. So I'm going to pretend that I knew that now when I wrote this.
I think somewhere up here you knew it. I think somewhere in the back of your storytelling head you knew it. It's also, there's a writer called Ben Aranovich who writes a series called Rivers of London.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of it as magical realism, but that's really what it is. It's urban fantasy.
Yeah.
And your stuff reminds me of him, which I love him. I love his stuff. So, and he does that detailed modern stuff where he uses myths and folktales. Anyway.
Can I say as well, like this is a play off this that Angela's just said. I'm a bit biased towards magic realism, but magic realism is a much lazier genre to write than fantasy. So if you're writing fantasy, you have to be very careful in what we call world building. So that if you're going to create Narnia or the lands in Lord of the Rings or even Star Wars, it's oceans and oceans of research and making sure that you don't put someone in the wrong place at the wrong time, saying the wrong language. And the same if you're writing historical fiction. So the research there is different. It's researching things that actually really happened, because there's always be a reader that will come to you and say, Hilary Mantel, Oliver Cromwell wouldn't have worn those kind of socks because they weren't invented till this time. There's always one of those people that comes up. Magic realism is, because it's now, you don't really have to do that much research. And also you can just make things up and say, oh, that's part of the fantastical element. That, ignore that. I can do whatever I want. Now it's quite dangerous in real life, because sometimes when I'm telling real stories and anecdotes, I trip into magic realism and my mum sort of goes, now, is that exaggeration or is that real? So be careful in the real world. But when it comes to stories, magic realism is definitely the genre of lazy writers, so feel free to run with that. Thank you so much for your comments, Angela. Have we got any other questions or comments? Or
yeah, I'd love to. I really enjoyed that. It was great, and I loved the wonderful descriptions. It was so vivid, which was brilliant. And I wondered whether you place any of your descriptive pieces about the characters around any of the knit and natter group, you know, or whether there were any kind of slightly things you had to think through a little bit, you know, and that was one thing. And then just the other, I mean, I come to this, I really haven't read much in years, in years and years. Because I've been stuck. You know, I've been working as a solicitor for a long time, and always made excuses not to read, or I didn't read, and so I really enjoyed just listening and sitting back and listening to you. And then I realized, actually, years ago, when I was really in school, I read a bit of Kingsley Amis. So that came back to me. So thanks for that memory.
Thank you. And I'll start with that, Anne-Marie. Like, please don't be intimidated by reading. I'm quite intimidated by music, and I don't really know my music terribly well. And sometimes I go into what I call record shops. I don't know what they're called anymore, and I don't even know where to start. I'm like, oh, there's just millions of things. What would I like? And I've understood that quite often people are like that with bookstores as well. I'm not, because this is my world and I just read. You can see behind me, like, this is one of 4 walls in my house that looks like this. Don't be intimidated by it. Find something that you like yourself. Like, it's absolutely okay to read for pleasure, and don't feel you have to apologize if you actually really enjoyed a book and it wasn't hard work. That's actually a win-win situation there. And you know, ask friends. If you've got friends who are big readers, go to them and say, you know, I remember I used to really enjoy Kingsley Amis books. What would be like him, or what else could I read that would be in that genre? It's one of my favorite things to do, recommend books. I've got a friend who lives around the corner, and she has 2 little ones, and she's just started reading again since lockdown, and she appears at my door once a week, knocks the door and says, can I borrow something? And I've been hand picking books from my library from Rushing. She gave me a lovely plant yesterday, and thanks for it. So that's one thing. The other question that you asked is a big question that writers get asked a lot, and it's basically, can you put real people into your fiction, and do they start suing you if you do that? My answer to that is, it's a little bit like what I said about primary storytelling language. You can only write with the building blocks of what you have. And the building blocks of what we have are our life experience. And that tends to be the people that you know. So whether you like it or not, little bits of the people who are in your real world are probably going to find their way into your fiction. What I do is I merge lots of people. So I can honestly say that I've never lifted a character from the real world and put them fully into a story, but there's bits of my granda, bits of my dad, bits of the people I work with, and you make this glorious hodgepodge of a thing, and nobody ever recognises them. So they'll come to you and say, that teacher in your story is such an old targe, what an old bitch. And you'll be thinking, oh gosh, like 70% of them is based on you. But that's happened so many times. Also, a really sneaky thing, don't be telling anybody I do this, but I change the gender of people. So if you've got someone that you really want to pull lots of their characteristics from, and it's a woman, just make them a man in your story and say, he did this. It just knocks people for 6. I like, my mum and dad feature quite a lot in my work, but my mum's characteristics always appear in men, and my dad's characteristics all appear in women, and they have never noticed.
Brilliant, thank you. That's great. That's great.
Let's see, any other questions? These are great.
A lot of, I noticed, first of all, thank you for sharing that with us. I really enjoyed that. It was very funny and very real to me as well. I could see a lot of things, like about the women all pretending they didn't want to be first in the pool and everything. And I definitely loved the little nod to the woman, the homely looking one that became a novelist. I thought that was cute. And I just wondered, do you use tools? Do you have like a list of descriptors that you keep handy for building out your layers and things? And another thing which I do, I don't know if it's a good thing to do, is to set myself time to go somewhere like coffee shops or libraries or parks and sit with a notebook and observe people walking past, and I make up my own stories about them. So what does it look like? Where are they coming from? Where are they going to? Are they happy? Are they sad? Things like that. You keep little pen pictures almost of different people that I might use at some point in the future. So
yeah, those are great questions, Fiona. And I'm a coffee shop writer because I like to watch people in the same way that artists like to, you know, have the person that they're painting in front of them. I like to have real people there so I can look up and, you know, if I'm looking to describe someone walking across the room or sitting or concentrating, they're right there and I can see them. So this has been quite hard for me, being stuck in a space and not able to get out. And I'm walking a lot more, so I'm walking an hour and a half a day and staring at people, which is bad, but it's helping. So yes, I do that. Another thing that I do is at the minute I'm writing a postcard story every day, and I've written 1,000 postcard stories in the last 5 years, which are tiny little 300 word stories. If anyone wants to have a look, I post them every day on Instagram on a site called Jan's Postcard Stories. There's a new one goes up every morning with an illustration from a child. And all of those are about things that I have overheard, seen, or encountered in the day. So that's the caveat on it. You have to be inspired by something you've encountered today. And what that does is it keeps your imagination really sharp. So I would have been like that a bit when I started writing, of keeping notes and keeping details. And I've trained my brain up a wee bit now. It's a bit like, you know, when you go to the gym and you train your actual muscles, you can respond much quicker. So my responses of, you know, when I'm trying to think of a metaphor or a simile, I quite often will start with the cliche, so as quick as lightning. And I'll write that down and then I'll go, what else is quick? I know what could be a specific thing that's quick, you know, as quick as a Ford Escort. Probably doesn't really work very well. And you keep playing with it and pushing the boundaries, and there's a point where those descriptors and metaphors run out and it becomes ludicrous, and your reader has to spend so much time thinking about what that means that you've actually lost the, you know, the power of the story. The flow's broken. That's when it's not a good descriptor. But right at the end of that, before it tips into unbelievable, that's where you get those very rich kind of like the ladies toeing the edge of the water, like elephants at a watering hole. Like, and sometimes it's trying to have a visual idea of what you're describing as well, like seeing it as a photograph snapshot, and how would you describe that? Another thing that I do when I can get out of here is I like to go to art galleries a lot, and I spent I was very, very lucky. I spent the first month of the year in Paris paid to write about art. So I spent a lot of time standing in front of paintings doing this. What can I see? And you can do that from your own house. You can pull up. I think all of those galleries have put their collections online. Pull up an image and spend some time writing down, what do I see in front of me? And how can I say that in a more interesting way, rather than just, it's a man with a dog, he's fat. Like, there must be a better way to say that. So yeah, keeping your imagination and your descriptive powers really sharp.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
Jan, I just want to say I really enjoyed your videos this week, and quite a lot was learned. You know, I've over the last couple of decades, I've toyed with the idea of writing, and I always get, you know, lost in research or lost in the idea of what's the structure, what's the character. But I thought you summed it up very, very concisely with, you know, start with the character, put in the situation, and that gives you your plot. So, you know, when I've had ideas for characters, then my question would be, how do you determine, should that go into a short story? Is that a longer story? So then I struggle with then sort of starting, you know, where do I build that character? But that was interesting that you say, you know, live with that character in your head and build it out from there. In terms of the sort of the folklore and the mythology, again, I've had an interesting week, but I've just, again, been lost now in just realms of research of Irish mythology and fairy tales and all of that. So then how do you bring yourself back down to, okay, where should you start, or where do you put it?
That's a good question. I'm still in somebody else's line of thinking in this, but it's a writer I love and a person who's become a good friend now, so he doesn't mind if I steal things. Irish writer Kevin Barry. Has anyone read any of Kevin's work? Absolutely phenomenal. And he does the same thing. He fuses kind of mythology, magic, and his descriptors are just hilarious. He's great. His short story collections are There Are Little Kingdoms and Dark Lies the Island, which we can maybe, I'll type it up on the chat here. And what Kevin says when it comes to research is get your story and then work out what you need to research. And that's a little bit hard for you guys because you're delving into myths and folklore at the minute. But what I mean by that is quite often research can be a rabbit hole. So you start to research and like, oh, that's interesting. I'll just go on that Wikipedia page. And then suddenly you're miles away and you are completely overwhelmed. And what you end up doing is what some of my favourite writers have done in the last wee while. Barbara Kingsolver is one of them. Margaret Atwood is another. They have done so much research. They've wanted to shove it all into their book to show how much work they've put into it. And the story gets lost. It just reads as somebody trying to tell you everything that they've learnt in the last year about this subject. What Kevin says is, you get your narrative line of like, I want this story to be about this. So I'll actually use this story to define this. I knew that story from the Bible from whenever I was a kid, but I didn't look it up until I was well into writing this story because I didn't want to get too much information about it and feel like I have to shove all of these things in. It felt better to get the kind of rough idea of the story and then go away and look up what is the name of the place and what happens and when does the angel come in and all of those things in case it corrupted the storyline. When it comes to a novel, it's probably much worse if you do too much research because you've got 90,000 words to overwhelm people with all of the fun things that you've learned about scuba diving or whatever it is. So just be careful with that, trying to get a kind of rough sort of narrative arc of what you'd like to say and then research and what facts do I need to kind of slot in here. And the same that I said of, going back and writing in that kind of layered way. If you've got 6 facts from your myth that you want to get in, that, the Irish word for this was whatever, and, she had magical ears, and whatever the 6 facts are, stick them down on a piece of paper, and then you can do the same thing of slotting them in as you go through your story so they're not in a big clump. In terms of where to start, because I struggle with that too, I look at the blank page for a long time. One of my favorite writers, Kurt Vonnegut, he says that you come in at the point of most action. So if it was a plane crash, you come in as the plane goes into nosedive because we're coming in and there's already something exciting to grab your attention. Now, as you get more and more adept at writing, you don't always have to come in there, but for people who are at the start of your journey, coming in when the car's starting to crane down the hill or your mythical hero has just fired his arrow across the battlefield or whatever, it means that you're sort of beginning at a run rather than having to lumber up to get started kind of thing. And then you can go back and tell us what we need to know the background of that. But starting with action can really help if you're struggling to get going.
Okay, thank you.
And just to make that, I guess, or to put that into the context of the writing exercises that are coming each week, like the idea behind that is just to get pen to paper and to start that process. There's no hard or fast rules. Like Jan will tell you more than I will, for my background is music and folk, but it's about getting pen to paper and figuring out what that looks like for you. So while the writing tasks each week maybe have a specific theme or a starting point, please don't feel like they're the only framework to work within or that you have to stick to them, because at the end of the day, they're your stories and it's your writing, I hope
Danielle,
you don't.
can I ask a question just about that then? Maybe more to Annie or to Jude, but to Jan as well. So you guys don't have a set format in mind for what you want at the end of this. Do you know, I feel a bit constrained because I'm not entirely sure. You know, does it have to be a very traditional folktale? Can it be something a bit more like Jan's, where you take a kernel of truth and you put it into something that is more contemporary? So what are you guys expecting to come forth?
Well, thanks for your question, Margaret, because I think it's one that maybe is on a lot of people's minds. I can see nodding heads and faces of fear. Can we hold on to it for just 1 second, because people might have more questions that are specific to Jan, because Jan is also, she hasn't told you, but she's actually been commissioned by the BBC and has been in filming and is a very busy, incredible woman. So if we've any more questions that are specific to her, we can ask those now, and then we'll have more of a conversation about the project and the tasks for each week and how we're getting on with them. Is that?
Yeah.
I ask if Jan has any recommended how to write books. I don't mean how to write, you know what I mean? Books about writing.
Yeah. So there's a couple that I really, really love. One, the biggie, the Bible for writers, is actually Stephen King's book on writing. And it's a really good overview, and it's very, very readable as well. And you will often find that he's referring to books that you've read, so he uses quite like easy to hand books. Another book that I really love is, I'm going to type these up at the bottom so you can see them as well if it helps. It's a book by an American writer called Anne Lamott, and it's called Bird by Bird. And it's very, very funny. Like, she's a deeply sarcastic, really, really self-deprecating writer who's always having issues, and I find it really freeing. Like, so that's her, you know, she talks about, she's asked, you know, how do you write a book, and she says the same way you describe a flock of birds, bird by bird. You do it sentence by sentence, word by word. It's really helpful. And then the last book that this is a bit more of an academic one, but it's very, very useful. It's a book called Into the Woods by John York, and it's actually a book for screenplay writers, so it's for people who write for film and TV. But what it's really good and clear on is how to set out plot and how to do things like dialogue and characters, and it uses film examples. So he'll be talking about Star Wars or movies that The Godfather and things like that, and I find it really, really helpful. So if you read those three, I have about 40 books like that upstairs. I think those three are probably the best that I've come across. I also wanted to say I had Arts Council funding there for the last wee while, and I used it to create 6 online writing tutorials, which are going to go live on my website next week. And each is a 15-minute session that looks at dialogue or character or memoir, or there's not really one on myth and folklore, but it covers a lot of these kind of things. There's little videos, and there's also kind of a written handout of what is going on and examples, and then also suggested reading from other writers. And they're all designed for people who are stuck in a small environment, so it uses things in your own house as inspiration for the sessions. So I'll stick up my website's just jancarson.co.uk, and the guys are editing them for me at the minute, but the first one should go up on Monday, and they're free, and please feel free to download them and pass them on to anybody who would find them useful. So hopefully that might give you a few more wee bits and bobs if it's character or dialogue or whatever you're struggling with.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else for Jan before she wanders off into the magical realist life
of BBC Scotland? That's where I'm going next.
I've got one, but I'm not sure. I don't really know how to word it. It's probably not a question. But just when I'm writing stuff, like if I'm telling a story to another person, I'm quite comedic, so they laugh a lot. And then when I write stuff down, it's super serious, and it just doesn't feel like me, I feel like I'm a bit pretentious on paper, which is definitely not me, because I'm not that. I'm very not humble. I'm a bit of a culty, so there's no airs and graces. But have you any tips on how to, like, I don't know, maybe kind of, have you had that experience before, or when you started out, were you a bit like you weren't seeing yourself in what you were writing? Or?
Yeah, I think it's, I always talk about, sorry, this is very disrespectful, but everyone has to kill their mother as a writer. And what I mean by that is everyone has got someone sitting on their shoulder going, don't write like that. You know, oh, I'm mortified. Why are you saying that? For me, it is my mother, so I'm always trying to kill her. But for a lot of people, it's their English teacher or someone who taught them that good writing is fancy writing. And I would imagine there's something in that if you tell a story one way and it comes out differently, that someone at some point in your life has said, this is what good writing looks like, and it's bollocks.
Okay.
I get so cross with, I'm trying to help my brother with his kids at the minute with their English homework, and the crap that English teachers are being made to put on to children about, you know, good writing looks like using an example of a metaphor, a simile, and blah, 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 blah. And the story's lost. So keep coming back to the story. Like you're writing, the words are only there to serve the story. The words are not there to show us your enormous vocabulary or how, you know, eloquent you can be. They're there to serve the story. The other wee sneaky tip is really, really simple and cheap. Read your work aloud.
Okay.
So the cheapest way to edit is actually to sit in your living room or coffee shop. I do it in the coffee shop, no shame, with my hand over my mouth, speaking to myself. You will not hear you'll not hear the flow of what you're writing, or whether it sounds forced or cliched or whatever, until you actually read it out loud. There's lots of scientific evidence around, you know, what your eyes reads is different from what your ear hears when you read. And that's what you should go by, what your ear hears. So even that's the first time that I've read that in public, read it out loud to myself a few times. There's a couple of things I need to go back and change in that I heard when I was reading it out loud to an audience. I would thoroughly recommend reading to yourself in your spare bedroom before you stand up at Edinburgh Book Festival and read something to like 300 people and go, I'm mortified. So learn how to read to yourself and hear what your work sounds like. But those are two wee tips. And it's funny, when I go back and look at things that I wrote 15 years ago, I can see that as well. Like my sentences have got a lot shorter and my words there's not as many syllables in them, because I'm much more free to write the way I actually talk now than I was 15 years ago. So part of it is also, Andrea, it's practice. There's no shortcut to doing the hard work.
Thanks very much. That's great.
Anybody else?
Yes, I have a question. I really, really enjoyed that. It was excellent. It made me think of my father, who's in his 90s, and he tells a story and he engages from not just his children, but the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. And without him even think about it, I listened to a little audio of a story he had told that I recorded the last time I was down. And he encaptured all those things that you said, given all the detail along the way, and, you know, describing the horse whenever it was climbing up the hill and making the noises and everything. So I feel in this group, I'm probably the least experienced in getting involved in the writing, and I'm a bit terrified. But listening to you and having you break it down like that, and then listening to my dad, I thought there's so many stories there that I want to share, and I shouldn't feel that I'm intimidated, you know?
Yeah.
And you've really inspired me to do that. But the question I wanted to ask you was, do you find that your mind works differently if you're writing using a computer to if you're writing with pen and paper? And if you're a beginner, what do you start to do? You know, to get your ideas flowing? I
have always written on a laptop, just because I write a lot, so a lot, like, you know, three books a year usually, and like one of those will actually get to publication. I always say I write a lot of shite to get to the good stuff, but if I don't have it on my laptop, it's not anywhere to play with. So I like to, you know, I might write something and 90% of it goes in the bin, but I copy and paste part of it and play with that. And for me, it's hard to have it if it's in notebooks, I'm going to have to end up copying it out at some stage anyway. What I do though is, I'm just reaching here and try not knock everything over. When I do the postcard stories, I do write them by hand. So this is my notebook that I'm working through at the minute. And I do one of these every day, and I'm trying to find a good example of a bad one. Yeah, so that's one, and you can see it, there's bits crossed out and arrows and things like this goes over here, and I scribble like this, and then I transcribe it into my laptop. And there's actually something psychological in moving from one kind of writing to another. So this is where my biggest edit happens, from writing by hand to typing it in. That's where my brain starts going, oh no, I'm going to put that word in, that's a better word there, or I've already said that. So it's another trick if you're editing, moving from one thing to another. If it's on the laptop, rewriting it by hand or transferring it to the laptop, your brain will start to filter through and change things and make those notes. But it's honestly whatever works for you. One thing I will say is, if you're serious about doing this and you want to keep it going, keep something on your person all the time where you can scribble down quick notes. So it could be having a notebook in your bag or your pocket. For me, I use my phone for that. So if there's a wee couple of lines that hits me, I'll always make sure to jot it down, because I don't know, my memory's not great, but I think most people, you have those moments of genius and then you get home and you've forgotten what the genius thing was and it's lost. So make sure that you have something with you to keep a track of it.
Thank you.
And you're not disappearing forever, Jan. If we need you to come back at any point in the future, you will do so and guide us valiantly into...
Yeah, I'm definitely not going anywhere because I'm not allowed to go anywhere. So.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that today, and we can stay on a little bit longer and have a chat, but I know that you are pressed for time. So thank you for doing the videos and the pre-recorded sessions and for breaking everything down with such kindness and clarity, because for me, it's so important as part of creativity, and it's been a real joy. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thank you for listening, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Hello. So yeah, I mean, I know we're due to finish at 4, so if people need to mosey on, please do. And it's just to chat a little bit more about Mags's question about, what the expectations are, or what you'd like from this, or does it have to be a certain format? And the short answer is there are no expectations. There's no, I am not sitting here, or anyone from the Making in the Future team is sitting here going, we have a certain idea of what we'd like to publish as part of the program or anything like that. It's a lot more free form, and I guess that's been reflected in the makeup of the program. We haven't stuck to kind of what might be understood as a traditional folktale or story. There's a lot of room to play with that, but as Jan was kind of saying, it comes from your own space and environment and place. So if that is your space and environment and place, then that's what the story will be. And I guess to give a little bit more context, there is a general idea of publishing these stories either in one of two ways. As a book, as an online publication and as a printed book, or as audio files for a map, which is something that Jude and I have been discussing and working on. And really, whichever form that takes is 100% up to however you feel more comfortable submitting your work, whatever that work might be. And there's no right or wrong answer. And I guess the way that we'll know that is because this is also trial and error. It's the very first time that we're doing something like this. So it's as much about you telling us what you want to do and what is working best for you at this time, because everybody is under lots of different time constraints and maybe pressures. And this program, for me, needs to be something that isn't an obligation, but and enjoyment. You know, it's supposed to be a bit of crack and coming together, which I find very difficult to create when I'm just sitting in my housemate's bedroom and messaging you on Slack, you know, with my own fears around how can we communicate this in an enjoyable way and in a creative way. Does that make a bit more sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion, which I don't know if, well, I've got a couple of questions on a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
I'm not sure that Slack is the most conducive way. I mean, and I don't know if this is feasible or at all possible, but I use WhatsApp all the time, and maybe other people do, and I chat to people all the time on WhatsApp. And I've installed Slack on my phone and on my computer, but I don't see much interaction. That's because we just don't know each other or whatever. But it just struck me that maybe because it's such a, I find it difficult to use, because trying to find an emoticon to say, oh, I like this, or how to reply, it's just not user. Well, I mean, that's just a bit of feedback. I don't know if that's at all possible.
Of course, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. But you know, there's various reasons why we use here as well. That's kind of out of our hands. But in the most, I think a lot of what it will come down to, Angela, is the fact that it's new to us all, and it is a wee bit more confusing than WhatsApp. But if you think about it in its most basic terms, it's the very same thing, but it is a wee bit trickier to use. You know, it's just about getting used to it. But if you try and not try and keep your eyes off all the clutter in the screen that's maybe confusing you, and just think of it as like a big, like your conversation scroll on WhatsApp. And the way, if you've seen something on, you know, on the news or on the internet, and you thought, oh, that there could be interest, do what you're doing and share it in the way you would do in a WhatsApp group chat, you know.
I think it's more difficult because I don't know about anybody else, and I'd be interested to hear what other people use. I use WhatsApp all the time, so I'm on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
You know, so but in order to say, oh, maybe the group might be interested in that. Number one, I don't really know you, so you're a bit more reluctant to go, oh no, look what I found. You know, because you don't know what people will think of you, but also you have to open the app to do it. Whereas I have WhatsApp open all the time. Anyway, that's just, I know what you're saying. I know there's probably good reasons for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Angela, thank you so much, because I mean, I completely agree with you on both accounts, and it's something that I have thought a lot about in trying to, I guess, bring people together in a way that we can't because we're not in person, which is the very first time I'm doing this as a community engagement officer. And it's also the very first time I'm running this particular program. So, and with this particular program, I recognize that it's a big ask, you know, asking someone to write a story within a week of meeting you and putting it up for people to see is like, oh, I can totally hear the fear. And I'll definitely be changing that for the next program, of maybe easing in on that first week to create that feeling of trust a wee bit more. So thank you for saying it, because it's really helpful to hear it. And I totally hear you about Slack. It's a new technology that I've had to get used to. You have no idea how much I was messaging Jude before I ran this program with lots of questions. But I would ask you just if you can bear with us and stick with it. I'd really appreciate it. And we'll give it a good go, you know. And I guess as well, because the Zoom sessions once a week are really the only time that we're coming together where we can see, okay, there's Shauna's face, there's Jude's face. I know they're not scared people who are going to judge me for putting my work up. So, you know, if also, and when it comes to sharing work, if it's not comfortable being shared on Slack straight away, send it to me on email, you know, and we can have a chat about it there, and we can have Slack as a conversation forum, or how are we getting on with things? Did we find it useful? Did we not? Because there's no right or wrong way to do this. And I was thinking a little bit as well as past week, I mean, you don't have a clue who I am either, you know. So if you have any questions for me in terms of my background or what I've worked on before that might be helpful in kind of demystifying some of those questions, throw them at me. That's what I'm 100% here for. And I would get way more out of having those conversations with you, knowing that you're getting something from them, than seeing someone getting to grips with Slack and emojis, because while I might have succumbed to the shaved haircut of lockdown, I'm quite an old-fashioned woman, and I'm a pen to paper writer as well. So does that make sense, or does that leave things a little easier?
Danny, sorry, I was maybe going to say, I hope you don't mind me intercepting, but I've been running a program as well with a group on Slack, and we found the first week we felt a very similar vibe in that it's as new to me and Danny as it is to you as participants. So in our first week, we found that the group were quite nervous about how to use Slack, but we just kind of wanted to reassure everyone when we brought you together that although we maybe don't know each other super well, you are all here for the same reason, because of your love of writing and folklore. So whenever it comes to that, like, know that the environment in Slack is a safe space and a private space. Like, no one externally will be looking at that. And so if you see anything that you find it interesting, the odds are that then, you know, your fellow participants in the group will enjoy that too. And once you kind of get over that barrier of just the general alienness of the Slack channel, like we found then in week 2, people just really kind of jumped into it, kind of took the leap of faith with ours. And it really is down to the participants to make the channel busy, if that makes sense. Because I think while everybody's nervous, everybody's maybe standing back and it's refraining from posting. And then it kind of creates this quiet channel where you're not so sure what to do. But with ours, it was great. People just started firing up maybe things they've seen online on the news, sharing bits of their work. You'll see in the channel, like, because it was new to me, I was posting things in the wrong place and having to redo things. But then we were all kind of just having a bit of a giggle about it, of like, you know, we're all just jumping in the deep end. It doesn't need to be perfect, and don't worry about it in that respect.
Cool. Thanks for that, Shauna, because Shauna also is on the phone to me, or I'm on the phone to Shauna every day being like, what am I doing? What is going on here? How, you know, but know that,
yeah, just reassure you, I've really enjoyed it so far. And I've done other courses where I've gone, oh, for God's sake. But this I've really enjoyed so far.
I'm also enjoying everything so far, and I've never used Slack before. I'm finding it a wee bit awkward and clunky in parts. I've used other things. I've used Microsoft Teams and Facebook and WhatsApp and all those. And I think in common with all of them, I didn't really like them when I first started using them because I didn't know how to do it properly. And I think the more I've used things, the more comfortable I've been. So I'm hoping I get to that place with Slack. I've already started sticking my tuppence worth in here. So,
I think just a wee suggestion. I think that would be maybe make it easier for us all to start sort of sharing ideas and with each other in Slack maybe this week. If we look at the sort of the first half of the wee task that we give you is there at the start of the week. I don't even know what day it is, to be honest. But,
Thursday, I think.
So we were asking you there for at the start of it, you know, to just think about, you know, some of the oldest stories that you know, stories that you might have heard growing up. You know, where did they come from, and you know, if you could write it down or not. But to think of each of those wee questions as something you could maybe post about a specific story yourself. I mean, this could be something that, you know, everybody in the group's heard. You know, something that, whatever one that you can remember from your childhood that sticks out. I was thinking about it during the week, and I cannot remember what the first one would be because it's so long ago, you know. But whatever one sticks out in your mind, you know, share them. You might find that a lot of you are sharing the same story. You might find that you'll find a story that you've never heard before. But even if it's just finding the story on the internet written somewhere and linking it in, so then that's given each of you participants a wee story to read then, and again spark on some inspiration from Jan's videos in our session today, and then you'll be able to have some more food for thought, I think. So it'd be nice to see some of your favourite stories, say, being shared in, if you can find them online. And, you know, I haven't went looking for loads, but maybe some of the ones that you might know, they might not be online, you know. But I think for the most part, we should be able to find, you know, the ones that we remember growing up. But it'd be interesting if you could start to do that. I think it'd be nice to then see I think it would be a nice wee way to spark some conversation, and then that might give you the confidence to hold on. I could maybe take a wee play in this story, and even if it's only a few lines, that's the thing. We're not we're definitely not expecting anybody to turn around and just be like, oh, here's a a first draft of a book that I decided to do in a couple of minutes over the weekend. None of us here are professional writers in the team. It terrifies me, the thought of writing, but it's still a really, really fun thing to break down. And I think that's what I like with Jan's session is she makes it very, very sort of user friendly. If it's a terrible term to use, it's very digital sounding, but she makes it sort of easy to start. And even if you maybe have an idea in your head, maybe you've got an idea for a character, feel free to put that up. I was thinking there, it'd be great to have a woman growing up 100 years ago or 200 years ago, and this might happen, or just to start. As Danny said there, there's no right or wrong. We've got no impending doom deadlines on you. We're not going to be. It's not like being back at school. But I think the more
you're not going to kick us out if we don't do the exercise.
I'll not say that. You need to behave. I might kick you out. No, definitely not. You would need to be a wild bad bunch for me to kick you out. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Challenge accepted.
So I think that might be a nice wee simple way to start it. Is just share stories that it could be Tierna Nog, it could be the Salmon of Knowledge, it could be it could be anything, and stick them up there and see if people, it might spark a memory, and somebody might go, I completely forgot that story existed. I remember my primary school teacher throwing a chair across the room because we wouldn't be quiet listening, whatever it is to kind of spark conversation. And I think with good conversation always gets creativity flowing.
I will undertake to do that, to start to kick that off, because I think it needs somebody to be a bit brave and do it, and I'm quite brave sometimes. So
but you're very right there. You're very right there, Angela and Fiona. So we were both mentioning earlier there about how nerve-wracking it is. Posting things or sharing work in general, whether it's in a room of people. I'm sure you can remember being in school and how horrible it was when you were put in the spot and you had to show your work. I think it's one of those things that's just natural for humans to always be nervous about sharing their work because there's a bit of them in it. Nobody wants people to think, oh, that's terrible. But the thing is, we're all here, we're all in the same wavelength. Nobody's going to be thinking that because we're all as nervous as each other. We want to get the fun side of it, and we've been having this a lot in all our programs that we've been running. They're not all being creative writing. We've got comic book ones, we've got loads of different ones, different ages of people, and from young to old, there's been that common theme that people are a wee bit nervous about sharing their work, and it puts them in the spot. Don't ever feel like you're being cornered and that you have to do it. If it really makes you uncomfortable, don't worry about it. You can send us a message and say, just leave me out of any of that stuff. We'll have no problem with that. But just know that it's a mental barrier that once you get past that wee barrier, I think you'll feel so much better going, oh, look what I did, fair play to you. I went out of my comfort zone and I just decided, who cares? I'm going to go for it, and you can put that into all parts of your life and it kind of works well for you, But I'm all this talk now. I'm going to have to put pen to paper and do something with that.
Dude, you can't get away with that.
Oh, terrifies me too.
It's also known that I'm probably the most nervous person on this program. So and if there's anything at all, please drop me a line. And Dorothy, was there something that you had wanted to say there a wee while ago?
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's the best way to upload anything audio?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to just pass that great question over to Jude.
Of course. Well, do you have the app on your phone, Dorothy?
No, I haven't downloaded it yet on my phone.
That's grand. Now, with the audio that you're talking about, would that be some type of audio that you've recorded on your phone?
It's a photo, a video photo, on the photo app.
Ah, right. I'm with you. So it's like a video file. Yeah. So if that's on your phone, I find the easiest way is a couple of ways to do it. You could email the file to yourself and download it onto the computer and upload that way. But I think if you download the wee app, the best way to do it would be upload from the phone using the app. I've got in the wee video that's on the Slack channel, I think it's in the pinned at the very, very top. There's a wee tutorial video of how to use Slack.
I should watch that again. Yeah.
But just at the very end of it, there's a brief wee bit that shows you how to use the app. The video app. I'm talking about them. I'm losing words now. So whether you're on an Apple or an Android, you can get the app for free. You have to sign in again, but if it's still not clear after that wee tail end of the video that covers the mobile app version, drop me an email and I can walk you through it. Anybody in the group at all, if they need walk through something, we can organize a one-to-one session or a phone call. And it might seem this is impossible or this is really daunting, but we can get through it all. No problem at all. And don't ever feel scared to ask a question ever, because there's no wrong question.
I've got the video on the computer.
Well, you could do it.
Easily do it on the computer then.
Yeah, if you know where you've got it in your computer, you might have it saved on your desktop or in your documents or in your downloads. There's different folders in your computer that the file might be. As long as you know where that file's at in the computer, when you go to Slack and click on the attach file, it's in the bottom. It's a wee paperclip logo that's on the bottom of the message box. When you click that,
yeah.
Again, flick through the wee video, and if it still makes no sense, just drop me an email and I can talk you through it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
That was just another wee thought I was going to say is just find a way in the channel that feels comfortable to you to work. So in my group, for example, there was some participants who just wanted to use emojis to respond. There was, even though we were doing a photography project, there was people that would like to write paragraphs and feedback. There was other individuals that would prefer to use voice notes instead of sitting and typing. So even for the likes of yourselves, if say you're sharing, for example, maybe your favorite books with the group, but you don't want to sit and write a paragraph, you could literally just take a wee photograph on your phone of your favorite book, post it up today. If you're maybe in the process of editing and aren't ready to share what you're writing yet, you could take a photograph of, you're writing on the laptop or you're writing in a notebook and just say, cracking away here, 3 paragraphs done, and that's what we find really kind of sort of helped bring our channel to life and make everyone feel at ease. Was we just said to everyone, just do what feels most comfortable to you. And we had some participants who just didn't want to share throughout, but were happy to come on and read and respond and use emojis. So it's just about feeling comfortable in yourselves about what method works best for you. And as Danny has said and reassured there's no pressure for anyone on output. It's just about enjoyment and kind of connecting. So please just feel comfortable to do that in whatever way is your preferred method.
And have a bit of crack,
What a crack. Main thing is crack.
Well, thank you for the, I think, was it Fiona that shared the site about the folk stories and everything that was happening in 1937 or whatever. And I discovered my aunt had written 8 of those stories.
Wow. That's amazing.
Handwriting.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh. And my father had told me that his sister had written for some book in Dublin and they were published, and I kind of went, yeah, so now he was right, and I can see them for myself, so thank you for that.
That's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I had googled a long time ago my grandfather, and that's how I stumbled across the site, but I've never actually read any of, I'd looked briefly at what people had written, but I was more interested in him, but it was because I knew he'd been a national school teacher. So it was very interesting then to start reading all the folklore, because I was thinking about trying to use one of the stories in a story.
Yes, I was doing the same. It's an amazing site. I love finding all those little pockets of stories and everything. That's great.
I had to go and apologise to my dad this week because of that website, because he used to always tell me about a fairy fort near our house in Armagh, and I always said, "Oh, you're talking shite." And then three people wrote about it on that website. So that's like that.
A lot of stories about fairy forts. There seem to be a lot of fairy forts about.
Tons of them. So be a bit more cautious now before I go skipping by with the dog.
Brilliant. Just one more wee thing there. It's sort of popped in my head from you talking, and Jan kind of talked on it there, where she sometimes get commissioned to write a story based on a piece of visual art, whether it be a piece of photography or drawing. So that's, feel free to share things that might not be writing. If you come across a really nice picture, or maybe some of you are photographers, I know some of you are animators, if there's a piece of your work, or if you come across a piece of work, you think that's, a picture, a picture speaks 1,000 words or whatever, you know what I mean? Share that. There's nothing that you could share that isn't gonna sit well in the Slack, unless it's crazy propaganda or something, or conspiracy theory. But you know what I mean? So pictures, stuff like that there, you might be out and you're walking, you might see the old ruins off an old, a fairies ring or a bit of an old building. Take a wee picture and upload it on. It might spark something.
Because that would be something I would really love to see, if any of you know of places that you can go that have, like, there's a standing stones at Ballyknoe near Downpatrick, and there's Strual Wells on the Ard Peninsula, and McCooey's Wells that has healing properties. If anyone had links to any sites like that, I would love to see them, because I want to go to them all when this is over.
There's a great site, I'll see if I can find it and post it, but there's a great, it's like Megalithic Ireland or something like that, which has, it's a proper, like, it's not just a weird, it's got photographs of all the different megalithic sites, the stones and all the rest of it, and then a bit about the history of it. So if I can find that, I'll post that.
That'd be brilliant. Thanks, Angela.
Yeah, that'd be really great. Thank you so much. And also thank you for taking the chance, and showing up, because even though sometimes it might not feel like we're doing anything, by showing up, we really are. And even in what you were saying there, Andrea, if you go out and take a photo, that is also something that we can publish then if we decide to go down the digital map route, that, that photo that you have taken of the fairy fort is then on that map to accompany whatever stories come out there as well. So this, we're very much going on whatever feels good to you, and we'll publish something that works within that. And I'm also interested to know where it is, because I'm from the Armagh Monaghan border as well, and I'm always keen to be traipsing up and down and round about. But it's just that it's 4:15 now, so if there's no other questions, we'll mosey on. And
can I just ask, where are the packs posted out? Because I never got one.
Yeah,
I was right. I don't have.
Yeah, packs are going to be a complete nightmare. They've been a nightmare in every one of our programs. Some people have got them in a couple of days. Some people have got them a week after they finished, but everything's been sent out. It's just, or at the mercy of the postal service, which I'm sure under serious pressure at the minute,
Angela, I just want to check if they haven't been posted out or something. That's okay.
Yeah. Dorothy, sorry, I think I lost you.
Sorry, I just said, Angela, I haven't got mine either, so you're not alone.
I just thought it was discrimination against people from Derry, you say?
Yeah, you
Angela, they're sent from Derry, so that's a bad sign, isn't it?
That's terrible. Well, it's the nerve centre, so I'll just say it's the nerve centre.
Blame the nerve centre.
Thank you so much for today, and for your honesty and for your questions. This program is only because you're here and doing it. Otherwise, who knows, I might be furloughed, which I highly doubt, but we'll say no more about that. And I look forward to hearing from you all on Slack and seeing how the next week goes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I really
you.
enjoyed this, so thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a lovely weekend. See you later.